A new book, Devil's Chessboard by David Talbot, reveals a lot of new information about 1950s CIA head Allen Dulles. The author sheds light on some previously unknown deeds, like a plotted coup in Allied France. Talbot believes that a lot of Dulles' legacy lives on today. RT's Alexei Yaroshevsky interviewed the author.
Mr. Talbot, thank you so much for joining us. Now, your new book, called The Devil's Chessboard, is an insight of what Allen Dulles, as a head of CIA, was doing in the 50s and 60s. Now, some of the things that Allen Dulles did as a CIA head were pretty well documented. What new things would readers find in your new book?
Well, I think several things. Number one, the first third of the book details for the first time the extent to which Allen Dulles and others in U.S. intelligence during World War II collaborated with Nazis. And yet Allen Dulles spent much of his time in Switzerland as a top spy for the U.S., trying to cut deals with the Nazi enemy. And this was because he saw the Soviet Union as a bigger threat to U.S. interests than Nazi Germany. And in fact, he helped set up rat lines, so-called rat lines. These were Nazi escape routes after the war, and permitted many prominent Nazi war criminals to escape that way, some of whom he later worked with in German intelligence after the war. So that's number one. Number two, I think it shows, this book, the extent to which the CIA under Allen Dulles targeted not only unfriendly, so-called unfriendly governments, democratic governments, but also our allies. In April 1961, while President Kennedy is grappling with the Q1 crisis that was instigated by the CIA in Cuba, the Bay of Pigs invasion, suddenly he's getting complaints, loud complaints from Paris, from the President Charles de Gaulle, that de Gaulle is the target of a right-wing French military coup, and de Gaulle is convinced that the CIA is behind that effort.
Why would something like that happen? And is this an indication that the CIA run by Allen Dulles pretty much had, they could do almost everything without even asking the political leadership in the country for advice?
Well, pretty much, yeah. I mean, when you're talking about Charles de Gaulle, you're talking about one of the iconic figures of Western politics and Western government in the 20th century. De Gaulle had antagonized people like Dulles by trying to settle the war in Algeria because they felt that there was a danger of the oil resources of northern Africa falling into the hands of the Soviet Union. De Gaulle was also a stubborn nationalist, and again was butting heads with NATO and the United States. So Dulles felt that he was too much of an irritation and had to be removed. Well,
without even
JFK,
asking the president about it, right?
That's right. So it turned out, as President Kennedy explained to the French ambassador in Washington, the White House had nothing to do with this, had no knowledge of the CIA involvement in this coup, even though it's now being reported widely in French papers and even in the New York Times. And he has to tell the French ambassador, I'm sorry, I'm not backing this coup, but I can't speak for my own agency, my own spy agency. So in other words, JFK has to tell an ally, Charles de Gaulle, in April 1961, I'm not in control of my own government. So it's quite a remarkable story, and I think it's told for the first time in my book, at least in the United States.
In the times when Allen Dulles was the head of the CIA, obviously his brother, John Foster, was the State Secretary of the United States. How instrumental do you think this factor of two brothers in very high echelons of power and security in the United States is to the CIA operations held abroad, those coups d'etats and all those things?
Well, it was a key relationship, obviously, to have one brother run the State Department while the other brother was the Secretary of State, as he put it, for unfriendly countries, i.e. he was the director of the CIA. And we all know what happened to unfriendly countries in that era, of course, of American politics, or even today. So they were a one-two punch, the Dulles brothers. And while one was a bit more diplomatic and would meet with statesmen and heads of government, Allen Dulles was working in the shadows. But they worked out their policy together. They, by and large, had the approval and the backing of President Eisenhower, who they served. But Eisenhower wasn't aware of everything. They got away with it. Why? Because the most powerful elements of American society wanted them to be acting this aggressively in the imperial interests of America around the world, enforcing American interests around the world for political and corporate reasons.
How much effect the Dulles policies of the 1950s, 60s, well, we can even call it a Dulles decade, have on the world of today, on America of today? What do you think?
Well, very much so. There's a through line there. In fact, basically, all the policies that we're grappling with on our conscience today here in the United States, torture, extraordinary rendition, CIA black sites, mass surveillance of private citizens, political assassinations, all of these policies and techniques were not originated after 9/11, but have their roots in the Allen Dulles era at the CIA. So yes, we're very much dealing still to this day with Allen Dulles' legacy, where there's a new enemy every week, a new boogeyman somewhere to blow up, and we're constantly at war, and we're constantly under the guise and supervision. And if America is to move forward, we have to decide whether we're going to continue living under this so-called secret government that I detail in my book, or a true democracy.
Thank you so much, Mr. Talbot, for being with us. Thank you so much.
My pleasure.